Today we're going to learn a speech of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. The Devar Malchut is talking especially about the calendar, how it came out, the day of the week, and etc. of Rosh Hashanah in 1991. And the Rebbe makes amazing connections over there, but that's not the way it is this year. This year, Rosh Hashanah comes out on when? Wednesday night. Is that right? Wednesday night, I think. Here we go. That's right. Yes, Wednesday night. Wednesday night is Rosh Hashanah. Okay, so it's not this year. But what we will do is we'll learn a speech of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and here it goes. It's based on this sentence. Ready? And it says, and it will be. This, by the way, is one of the sentences which say clearly that God is going to gather up all the Jewish people. And he's never going to abandon the Jewish people. Okay, and it comes when all these things happen, all the blessings and the curses that I put before of you, and then you will take it to your heart among the non-Jews that you have been pushed into. In other words, the Jewish people have been spread around the whole world. This was only, by the way, now, after the second temple. After the first temple, the Jews were scattered only into Babylon. And after the second temple, so Moses was prophesying something that was going to be in another, at least 1,000 years after the second temple was destroyed. And essentially, he was prophesying back then what's happening right now. That's 3,300 years ago, right? So it says, when all these curses and everything come to you, and you take it to your heart, among all the non-Jews where you are, and you will return to God, and you will listen to his voice, and everything that I command you today, you and your sons, and with all of your heart and all of your soul. And here's the sentence. Here we are. This is the sentence of this week. And you will return, and then God, he will return all of your exiles. And he will have mercy on you. And he will come back. God will again, and God will gather you from all of the nations. That God, it's written in the Bible, here we go, that God is going to gather you together where he has scattered you. You have not been scattered because of your deeds. You haven't been scattered because of whatever. God decided he wants to scatter you around. It's a decree of God. And God is going to gather you up together also. Right? You'll return to God. If God scattered you to the ends of the heavens, from there he's going to gather you together, and from there he will take you. Right, etc. Okay, so let's go back. This is the sentence we're dealing with. God will return, and all of the exiles, and he'll have mercy on you, and he'll gather you all together from the nations that you've been scattered around. Good, let's go. Speech of the Rebbe. Oif, on the sentence, V'shav Hashem Elokecha, that God will go back and he will return all of your exiles. Frekt Rashi. Rashi asks, V'haya lo lichtov, it should have said, V'heshiv, that God will return. Not shav means that God will make return. Shav seems to imply that God himself will return. Heshiv et shavutcha. It should say that he will make return. He'll return others. What does it say, shav? It seems to be that God himself will return. Was the kavana, which the intention is on anstatt, instead of the word shav, hat gesagt stehen, it should have said v'heshiv, that God, he will bring back, not that God will come back. All of it, God will bring back. And also, why does it say Hashem Elokecha? Why does it say God, your God? It could say that God, Hashem, God will return. What is it, God, your God? Eshtei doch erst, it says, as the Hagdama, the Siba from the Shav, that the reason that it says the word Shav, that God will return, Muzain, it should be B'shavta et Hashem Elokecha, that because you return to God, Shavta, the U.S. says, is Mida Keneged Mida. It's like, how do you say, the action and reaction. Durach Vashavta, because you return to God, Ad Hashem Elokecha. So therefore, God will return to you, Shav Hashem. Then God, He's returning Himself. Huh? Is Dachmuvan, so it's understood as their Shav. That what it means that God, He will return, or Heshiv, or God will make return. Gate es oif dem Hashem Elokecha. It means that God will return until this aspect of Hashem Elokecha. Dem Eibishter, God is going to return. What does it mean? What does that mean that God is going to return? That you're going to regret your sins and that God is going to regret his sins. What does that mean? When Rashi answers, Rabotenu Lomdu, the rabbis learn from here, Kivyachol, so to speak, that Shechina, that God's presence, God's presence, Sharuya is Im Yisrael with the Jewish people, but Sarat Galutam, that God suffers from our exile. Ukishenigalu, when the Jewish people are redeemed, Hichtiv Gu'ula Latzmo, he signed his own release. Shehu Yashuv Iman, that he will go with them. So to speak, God is the jailer, and God is also a prisoner. God put us into exile, but God is in exile with us. How are we going to get out of the exile? God is going to sign the release papers. How can he do that? He's one of the prisoners, right? He's one of the prisoners. So it says, good. So it says, therefore it says that God will return, the word et also means with. God will return with your exiles. But that's not the simple meaning of the sentence. The simple meaning of the sentence means that God, he will make return your exiles. That's simple meaning. Now let's have a look. Shav Hashem Elokecha, that God, he will make return your exile. Let's see if we get over Rashi over here. 1 second. I think we get Rashi. 1 minute. No. Oh, here it is. Rashi or Achaim. Why does he leave out Rashi? I don't know. Interesting. Okay, I don't know. I have to look and see where Rashi is. Okay, the Rebbe brings down what Rashi says. Okay. Okay, so it's as though God is saying that he is going to return, he himself will return together with the Jewish people. We have to understand. Okay, so again, here we have a promise from the Torah that the Jewish people are going to be gathered up from all of the weird places where they are. So, whatever. Go off. How did that happen? All right. From all the weird places where the Jewish people are, is they're all going to be gathered up together. They'll be gathered from all over the world. Jews that don't even know that they're Jews. We see it happening in Russia today. All of a sudden, Jews are waking up, right? Jews are amazing. So it says we have to understand, in Parshat Shemot, in the book of Exodus, Hatshoy and Rashi already explained, as das was der Rebbe, that which God, as bewezen, showed Moses, mitoch hasneh. Why did God appear to Moses in the bush, a burning bush? Why in a bush? Is this mishum? Because imo anochi b'tzorah. Over there, it already said in the book of Exodus, when Moses, before he took the Jews out of Egypt, as God appeared to Moses on a burning bush. The burning bush was on Mount Sinai, right? And God appeared. He said, why a burning bush? Why? He says, because to let you know, I mean, if you think about it, it's not really nice for God to appear in a bush. You know, God has to be a big mountain or a big flame from heaven or some. I mean, there you got a little bush, right? A little, what is it? A bush that doesn't even have any fruits on it. It's got all these burrs on it, whatever it is, thorns. And that's where God appears. And the thing burns up the bush, and it keeps burning up. A little tiny fire. What type of a fire was it? It's a burning one. So it says, why? Because to show that I am with the Jews in their pain. Here's a bush, a little bush, and it's burning. That's the Jewish people suffering. And I'm speaking to you from there. That's what I'm speaking to show that I am in pain with the Jews. So we already learned that message in the book of Exodus, right? Right before Moses took the Jews out of Egypt. We know that God is suffering with the Jews. Is v'zokt Rashi? How can Rashi say over here that we learn first time mikan? Rashi says from here we learn, right? That's what it said over here. Rashi says, one second, it says mikan. Too bad I didn't have it. Oh, here it says, Rashi says, mikan, from here we learn that God is suffering. That's what Rashi says. From here, the rabbis taught us that God is suffering with us. What does it mean from here? We already learned this 5 chapters, four books earlier. We learned that God is suffering. What does it mean from here we learn? From here, that God says, I will return together with your exiles, that I am also in exile. We knew that from Moses. God was in the exile. He was suffering with the Jews in Egypt. Why does he say that from here, only now in the book of Deuteronomy, that God says, for the first time, I have been suffering with you and I'm going to go out? What do you mean? God said that years before. The Eisman Veist is showing from Parsha Shmot. So when did Moses say all this? He said it 40 years after the Jews got out of Egypt. And God spoke to Moses from the burning bush like 1 year before the Jews got out of Egypt. So in those 41 years at least, earlier, God already told Moses that I'm suffering together with you. So this is not, why does Rashi say from here we learn that God is suffering with the Jews? Another, it says, what does Rashi bring? Here it says, Imo anochi b'tzora, that with you I am, so what does it say? That I am with the Jews in their pain. Imo anochim is dach beferish pasuk. There's another sentence in the Torah that says, I am with the Jews, imo anochi b'tzora. I am with you Jews in your pain. This is a clear sentence in the Torah. Darvman does nit upschlagen, so we don't have to say that we learn it from here, from Duke, from in another sentence. Let's see, where is this? It says, 1 second. Imo anochi b'tzora. Let's have a sentence, 1 second. Here, it must be over here, 1 second. Im Yisrael b'tzara t'gulazon. Does he bring that? Did he bring that before 1 minute? 1 minute. I'm sorry. Okay. Anyway, it says that God, there's a clear sentence that says, Imo anochi b'tzara. God says, I am with the Jews in their pain. A clear sentence. What do you mean? This sentence was says before. What does it mean that God, from here, we learn that God is suffering together with the Jews? Imo anochi b'tzara is another sentence in the Torah. We can learn clearly from that, not from here. Is b'firish pasuk. Oh, here it is. This is here. It says Rashi. That's what it says. Here it says mikan, that the Shekhinah is shora im Yisrael b'tzoras hagalusa. So we learn that God suffers with the Jews from another sentence, right? This is a clear sentence. So here it is. This is a clear sentence in the Torah. Where is the sentence here? In Psalms 91. Imo anochi b'tzora, right? Achaltzeu v'achabdeu. It says, I am with you in your pain. So if so, that sentence is in Psalms also, right? If it wasn't written here, we could learn it from Psalms. Was gefind Rashi, which I'm sorry. Yeah, what do you mean from learning here? Number 3. Okay, so we have 2 questions so far. What does it mean that Rashi says, from here we learn that God suffers with the Jews? We learned that from the burning bush. Not only that, there's a explicit sentence in Psalms that says that God suffers with the Jews. Not necessarily from here. Number 3, in the sentence that God will return, Shav Hashem Elokecha, that God, your God, will return, it says only as the Eibishter of God kehrt sich from Gullus. It says that God, he comes out of exile. That God will return with your exile. What does it mean? It means that God, when you go out, so God will go out. Was gefindt Rashi, which Rashi finds in their pasuk, Tadgasha, there is the stressing. It's stressing that the Shechina Shorya B'Yisrael B'Tzorat Gelusam. How does this show that the Shekhinah is suffering together with the Jews? From them pasuk, from this sentence, it just says that God is just with them. It doesn't say that he's suffering with them, right? What is it? V'shav Hashem et shavutcha, that God will return with your exiles. It could be that God is not suffering in exile, but when you go out of exile, it's like, God forbid, let's say a person has a son in prison. So the son gets out. The father's not in prison with the son, right? But the son gets out. So the father, so to speak, he's freed. But it doesn't necessarily mean that he's in pain, right? The father is freed from the trouble. Doesn't mean it doesn't mean that God suffers together with the Jews. It also doesn't make any sense. What does it mean God suffers? Was das wird gesucht in the pasuk, like it says, there in the Psalms, King David says that God suffers. Oh, or there's another pasuk. It says, "B'chol tzorotam lo tzar." It says that in every God's in the suffering of the Jews, God suffers. It says that it does say, but not in this sentence. In this sentence, it says that's a sentence in Isaiah. But in this sentence, it says in the Torah, Rashi says this shows that God suffers with the Jews. But if you look at the sentence in the Torah, it doesn't say that God suffers with the Jews. It says that God is with the Jews in exile. It could be put himself there purposely, right? But not that he's suffering. Dalet. After Rashi said that the Shekhinah is with the Jewish people in the exile, is doch shoin. This is automatically understood as V'shad the Yidden, when the Jews go out of exile. So God obviously is going to go out of the exile. So Livos, what does Rashi have to say? When the Jewish people are redeemed, then God will go out with them. I mean, one second. It doesn't make any sense. That's what Rashi is saying. God is in exile. God is the boss of the whole thing. God is he put the Jewish people in exile, right? So maybe God, it could be that he's there with them, that they pray, but God is not in exile. God is not in exile. It's just that God is attached to the Jewish people, and because he's attached to the Jewish people, so he's there with them. Don't worry. When you pray to God from exile, he will listen because he's there with you. But it doesn't say in the sentence that God suffers. Doesn't. In Psalms, in the book of Psalms, and in Isaiah, it says that God suffers together with the Jews. Good. But not from this sentence. This sentence over here in the Torah, it doesn't say that God suffers. And Rashi says that it does. Now, who is Rashi, by the way? Rashi is Rabbi Shlomo Yitzchaki. He was the foremost. He lived about 900 years ago. And he's like the foremost commentary, the simple meaning of the Torah. The foremost commentary, the simple meaning of the Torah. I mean, if you really want a well-rounded understanding of the Torah, you have to read as many of these commentaries as possible. But nevertheless, the most simple of them is Rashi. And here Rashi is saying very simply that from this sentence we learn that God suffers together with the Jews. Okay, so we have several questions over here, right? Right, and the main questions are on what Rashi says. Question number one, why does Rashi say over here we learn that God is together with the Jews in exile? It said that by the burning bush. We learned that from before. But we already knew that before. Another question is, why does it say, how do you learn from here that God is suffering with the Jews? God is with them, but it doesn't say that he's suffering. God is suffering. Also, what does it mean that, so we had the one question, was it? I forgot. Let's see. Oh. Right. Why even, there's other sentences in the Torah that do say that, especially in Psalms and in Isaiah. They say clearly that God is suffering. Here it doesn't say that God is suffering at all. It just says that he's in exile with the Jews. Also, another question: what does it mean that God goes out with them? Obviously, if God is with the Jews or He's just available, then when the Jews got out of exile, He's not going to stay there, right? He's not going to stay there. Okay. So after Rashi says that the Shekhinah is with the Jewish people in exile, is with the Jewish people in pain in their exile, so we can understand automatically that if God is in pain and He's in exile, so what does Rashi say after that? That when the Jews go out of exile, then God will go with them. Let's have a look over here. Oh no, we don't have Rashi over here. We didn't have Rashi. Oh, so what he says that God is in pain, he's with the Jews in exile. And when the Rashi says, when the Jews go out, so God will go out. I mean, it doesn't have to say that. Obviously, when the Jews go out, God is not going to just be in pain for no reason. They're not in exile anymore. Why does Rashi add the words, when the Jews go out, God will go out? Now, you have to understand, the Rebbe is not trying to show that Rashi made a mistake. The Rebbe is trying to show that Rashi is coming to tell us something that we're not aware of, something very, very deep, very, very important, maybe even urgent. Rashi is trying to give us a very, very deep, important, essential, critical message over here about the Jews going out of exile. Going out of exile. And I mean, when we see what that means, we'll see that there's nothing more important than that. There's nothing more important than going out of exile. Then Rashi, we have to know that it's possible. That's the point. If you have, God forbid, a person that's blind and he's deaf and he's paralyzed, right? So at least he knows that he's blind and deaf and paralyzed. He would like to get out of it, wants to get out of it. But we Jews, it's very difficult to understand what's so bad about the situation that we're in. What's so bad? I mean, what is it? What are we missing? What are we missing? Are we supposed to see something we don't see? We're supposed to hear something. What are we supposed to see and hear? So the Rebbe is trying to get to us, and that's what Rashi is, and that's what the Torah is trying to get to us, that the Jews are in exile, and the Jews are blind and they're deaf and they're paralyzed, and that God is going to take them out. And while the Jews are in exile and all these things, God is in pain. God Himself is in pain. That's what it says. And we're supposed to be waiting any second that we're supposed to go out of this pain. And more important, that God's supposed to go out of the pain. Okay, so what is this? We'll see. And that's what Rashi is trying to hint to us, what exactly the implications of this. And it says, Van Rashi, if Rashi will shoin Zagan, if Rashi also wants to say clearly, let me make this bigger. Make it bigger. If Rashi would have already tell us, if Rashi wanted to tell us explicitly, even though it's understood on its own, that God is going to go out together with the Jewish people, right? I mean, obviously, if the Jewish people go out, is God's going to be with them. Why does Rashi have to say explicitly that God is going to go out with them? Why? In order, if Rashi's intention was in order just to explain them lashon, the language of Shav Hashem Elokecha, that God will return, God Himself will return, as Hater Gadarf, he could have just said, Ukashenigalim Yeshuvim, when they go out, God will go out with them. Which means, what does Rashi mean by say, Hichtiv Geula La'atzmo? Said that God He made exile on Himself, and then He's going to go out. Let's see the language. Here it goes. It says, here, let's see the language of Rashi. Here it says, it says, Rashi says, Rashi says, Rabbeinu Lamdu, the rabbi, said that from here we learned She Hashchina, that God is in exile with the Jewish people. And when the Jewish people go out, Hichtiv Geula, God writes, he signs Geula, a redemption for himself. God signs the release papers. He signs the release paper for himself. What does Rashi have to write that from? Rashi is not a poet. Rashi is trying to tell us clear, concise meaning that God, he writes down redemption for himself, that God will come out with them. Okay, why does Rashi have to say, just say that God will go out with them? That's all. What does he have to, God writes down a redemption for himself. What do these words mean? Anyway. Right. God, it was obvious God will go out. What does he have to write down? That God will, he will write down, he will sign the release papers for himself. What does that mean? Okay, so we have all of these questions, and we're going to deal with this tomorrow. The Torah says clearly God is going to gather up all the Jews and is going to take them out. But the sentence seems to say that God, he will not gather up the Jews and take them out. It says that God, he will return with the Jews. God will return. And Rashi says, and this shows also that God is suffering. How does Rashi know it's suffering? And it says that from here, this is the first time that we know that God was in exile. It's not the first time in the burning bush God said it. Okay, so what is this telling about this future redemption that's going to be? Something amazing is going to happen. Right? When the Jews, for instance, Israel won the 6-day war, the whole world was upside down. And this amazing thing happened. All the Jews woke up. We're all Jews. Something that, says the Rebbe, infinitely more so it's going to be when there was the 6-day war. People didn't know what to do with this being, so I'm a Jew, so what? Give money to Israel. Okay, do something. Says the Rebbe, no. The fact of the matter is that God is also in exile and that God is suffering. And if you don't know that you're suffering, as you'll find out, that the fact of the matter is that all of this time we have been suffering terribly. And also God is also suffering. And that the whole idea of going out of this, gathering the Jews and bringing them true Jewish identity of Torah and commandments and bringing them to the land of Israel is going to stop the suffering of not only the Jewish people, but also of God, which essentially means of the whole world. There won't be any more suffering in the world. How is this going to be? How is this hinted at by Rashi? How is Rashi telling us all this? God willing, tune in tomorrow.